Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rachel Pearsall. I'm the online learning manager with the National Alliance to End Homelessness, and I'm delighted to be joined by Camille Sims Russell, who is the Vice President for Programs and Implementation at Partners for Home in Atlanta, Georgia. Camille, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Rachel. And what I can share is that my journey to really the homelessness sector was a result of really supporting and working alongside families, first in the Department of Education and Head Start, and having to support families navigate those hard choices between housing and food and stability and education with children with disabilities, and then went on to really work in shelters, domestic violence shelters, in homelessness shelters in the New York City area, where I got to see firsthand from a literacy lens the impact of homelessness and just the vulnerabilities that come alongside it. And I had always been interested in really those crunchy questions that come up with how do people navigate the homelessness response system and all the myriad of stories that come along the way. So I came to Partners for Home because people I care about very, very deeply were served through the Lift 1.0 project, and I wanted to be a part of the good that was going on. So any opportunity that opened at Partners for Home, I really was just looking forward to it. And that's really what brought me directly into the homelessness response system.
So you've worked a lot across several different systems, and system dynamics are really what we're here to talk about today. We know that there are best practices for homeless response, and we know that those practices are most effective if they're rolled out across a community's homeless response system. But that kind of change, just like any kind of change, can be difficult. So, what are some of the dynamics that stand in the way of system wide adoption of a best practice?
Being able to speak each other's language. We know that different sectors have their own frameworks, philosophies, research, and knowing how to understand your audience and how to understand their motivations and their priorities, and now they align with the homelessness response system. I think when we talk about it, right, we are thinking about not just our providers of housing support or case management or street outreach. We're also talking about the city and municipalities, the counties, the states that have their own teams, their own departments that also address homelessness. So I think one of the things that can be a huge barrier is just the competing priorities, and then also understanding what everybody's talking about. There are experts across many different sectors who are really used to speaking and being with their community and their experts, and so being a powerful translator to be able to help each other connect and recognize we're saying the same things, we may be saying it in different ways, or we may have the same goals, or we're really looking for the same outcomes, but we're going at it at different ways, is definitely a challenge I've seen across the system.
So, when leaders, and by leaders, I don't just mean people in formal leadership positions. I mean anybody who wants to step up and influence the system. When they want to implement some kind of systemic change, some kind of community wide change, what are some of the first things that they should do?
I would say number one, the first thing to do is bring the experts in the room. Of course, making sure that you're hearing from the people with lived experience and finding platforms and opportunities for the community who are really being impacted and have their experiences to share, to really ground what is happening on the ground level from a programmatic standpoint, but just also from what are also some of the gaps, what are some of the ways that expectations have been, or even hopes have been broken along the way. The second thing would be is also to have a multidisciplinary or a multi-sector approach, to be able to have people who can speak to the development side of affordable housing, the medical side, where we know that folks are navigating mental and physical health challenges. Oftentimes, the experience of homelessness can create physical or mental health challenges. And then being able to have I think, a multi generational perspective as well. It's important to be able to have our elders and our stewards who've been really the backbone of the system, but it's also important to hear from new voices, folks that may have other perspectives, who have different training or philosophy backgrounds that could really enrich the perspective on how we build something together.
So sometimes a change in practice requires a change in culture. There's that saying that we hear all the time: "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Um, how would you go about uh, how would you go about the kind of change that requires a cultural change? Like, what advice do you have for communities about that?
One, this is a really good question that I think I reflect on often because culture is so integral to people's understanding of how plans, dreams, projects get built, and there's always an inherent influence from that culture. I would say one of the things that has been particularly poignant this year is understanding the legacies and cultures of the people who are experiencing homelessness, to bring it to the center of anything we design, but then also understanding that culture has a socioeconomic dynamic, it has a racial dynamic, it has a faith dynamic, it has even a generational dynamic. And I think being able to, I said earlier in one of your questions around translating and speaking their language and figuring out how do you see this problem? How do you see the solution? And what are we saying together so that we can accomplish and center the culture that's representative of the people we intend to serve? I think every city and community is different. I live in the city of Atlanta, and I know that Atlanta looks very different than Seattle, than Tampa, than even communities in my own state where we have that rural city divide. And I think being upfront about that and investigative about that, creating a space where culture can be the conversation. When you come into the planning, let's be overt about it. And what is the culture? What are the dynamics that we're grappling with, so that we're open and honest about the dynamics that we're bringing into our planning, and what are some of our blind spots too. I think that's the other power and benefit of having people with lived experience. They're going to bring their culture, and they're going to bring their perspectives of how it landed on them, and they may be stewards or advocates for a particular culture or community, and can help you bridge and get the perspective you may need to be able to be a visitor, to be someone to invite people in so that they can be a part of the planning too.